My name is Daniel, and I'm 32 years old. If you asked anyone who knew me growing up, they'd tell you I was the quiet one, the one who faded into the background. I wasn't loud, I didn't demand attention, and I definitely didn't stir up trouble. I was the kid who fixed things, the one people came to when they needed something done reliably, without fuss. It's still pretty much how I am. I built a decent life for myself as a software engineer, steady income, saving up diligently for a down payment on my first house. I had about $50,000 tucked away, earmarked specifically for that goal. It felt good, solid, like I was finally building something just for me. My younger brother, Caleb, is different. He's 28, works in sales, and thrives on flash and presentation. Designer suits, leased German cars, a social media feed that looks like a curated lifestyle magazine. We used to be close, thick as thieves as kids. Shared a room, covered for each other when we messed up. But somewhere along the way, after college, the paths diverged completely. He chased the spotlight. I preferred the steady hum of my computer. Our calls became less about catching up and more about him talking at me. Or worse, subtly dismissing my life as safe or boring. There's a history of me being Caleb's quiet safety net. It started small years ago when he got into some debt trouble he couldn't handle. I stepped in, helped him navigate it, even spotted him some cash I never really saw again. It wasn't a huge amount then, but set a precedent. I just did it because he was my brother. I didn't want to see him fail. Then came the business idea. Importing high-end, niche goods sounded impressive when Caleb pitched it, but the reality was high risk, complex logistics, and needing a massive chunk of upfront capital for inventory and warehouse space. He came to me in a panic. He needed a co-signer for a significant bank loan, $300,000. My stomach dropped when he said the number. It wasn't just a favor. It was putting my entire financial future, my carefully saved house fund, my credit, everything on the line. I pushed back, gently at first, pointed out the risks. But he was desperate. He appealed to family, swore this was his big shot, promised to be responsible. Against my better judgment, driven by that ingrained need to prevent disaster and a sliver of hope that this time he'd finally get his act together, I agreed. I co-signed. $300,000. It immediately tied up my credit, effectively pressing pause on my house plans. I didn't tell our parents. It felt like my burden, my risk. I just managed it quietly. Over the past year and a half, I'd gotten used to monitoring the account, occasionally having to nudge Caleb about payments, sometimes even wiring emergency funds myself when things got tight on his end, money he'd swear he'd send back, but rarely did, like that $3,000 last fall, just one instance among many. All without fanfare. Just Daniel being Daniel. Dependable. Invisible. When Caleb got engaged to Aurora, I was genuinely happy for him. I'd met her twice. She was striking, very focused on aesthetics. She talked about their brand as a couple, and once asked me, with a slightly pitying look, if designing wind turbine parts, which is part of my job, was fulfilling compared to building a dynamic network, which I took as a not-so-subtle jab at my life. I tried to make an effort for the wedding. RSVP'd the day the invite arrived. Offered to help with any tech setup or logistics, politely declined. They had a joint bachelor/et weekend that sounded exorbitant. I wasn't invited, but I Venmo'd them $3,000 anyway, a ridiculous amount for an event I wasn't attending. But again, I just wanted to contribute to show I was part of the family, happy for them. It stung a little, sure, but I brushed it off. The wedding gift felt important. That $7,500 check wasn't just money. It was a piece of the down payment I was sacrificing. I wrote a heartfelt note, tucked it into a nice silver envelope, wishing them well, hoping this money would help them start strong. It represented my sincere hope for their future, a future I was quietly, significantly invested in, both emotionally and financially, through that massive loan. Driving to the Vineyard venue an hour outside the city, I had this weird knot in my stomach. Not nerves about seeing people, just a feeling, like the air was thick with unspoken things. The venue was stunning, rolling hills, rustic charm, but everything felt staged, like a photo shoot waiting to happen, rather than a genuine celebration. I parked, smoothed down my rented suit, and walked towards the entrance. The first thing I looked for was the seating chart, propped up on an easel. I scanned it, then scanned it again. My name, Daniel Hayes, wasn't on it. My blood ran a little cold. I figured it was a mistake, a last-minute oversight. I found a young wedding planner, clipboard in hand, looking harried. "Hi, excuse me," I said, trying to sound calm. "My name's Daniel Hayes. I think my name is missing from the seating chart." She flipped through a stack of papers, her brow furrowed. Then her eyes widened slightly, and her expression shifted to something awkward, almost pitying. "Oh, Daniel, you're Nate's brother." "Yes, she got my brother's name wrong." "Oh, sorry, Caleb's brother." "Right? Yes, there were some unexpected adjustments. You're actually, you're supposed to be over there." She vaguely gestured towards a far corner of the reception area, near what looked like the entrance to the kitchen or service area. "There's a single chair set up for you behind that large pillar, near the back. A single chair, behind a pillar, near the service entrance. Not even at a table." My stomach twisted. Still trying to convince myself it was a weird, temporary solution, I walked towards the area she indicated. And there it was, a lone folding chair, awkwardly placed, almost hidden by a massive, gaudy floral arrangement on a pedestal. It was right next to the swing doors that staff were using to move in and out of the kitchen. Loud, busy, completely out of sight of most of the room. And then I saw it. On a beautifully set table, closer to the front, where I assumed my seat should have been, there was a place card. Not with my name. It read, "Tiffany, Aurora's creative consultant +1. I didn't know any Tiffany. I saw a woman with bright pink hair and glasses perched on her nose, talking animatedly to a group of people I didn't recognize, sipping champagne from a crystal flute. In my seat, the shock started to give way to a deep, hot wave of humiliation. I tried to keep my composure. I spotted my parents near the ceremony area, Dad adjusting his tie, Mom fixing her hair. I walked over, trying to keep my voice level. "Hey, Mom, Dad, do you know what's going on with the seating? My name's not on the chart." And they pointed me to a chair behind the pillar by the kitchen. Mom barely looked up. "Oh, that." Yes, it was a last-minute thing. Aurora's family had more guests than expected, and we had to make room. "Don't worry about it. Just stand towards the back for the ceremony. You can see fine from there." Stand towards the back? For my brother's wedding ceremony? I felt my jaw clench. Dad gave me a quick, disapproving look, the kind that said, "Don't make a fuss." "It's not a big deal, Daniel," Mom added, waving her hand dismissively. "Just don't look so sulky. You'll ruin the pictures." Ruin the pictures. The words hit me like a physical blow. That was it, wasn't it? I wasn't part of their aesthetic. My quiet presence, my slightly less than perfect suit rental compared to Caleb's tailored designer tux, my face that wasn't carefully curated for Instagram. I was a potential blemish on their perfect visual narrative. Just then, Aurora herself drifted by, radiant in her dress, trailed by her bridesmaids. She paused for a moment, a bright, artificial smile on her face. "Oh, good. You found your spot," she chirped, not waiting for me to actually confirm. "We're just being super mindful of the aesthetic for the photos, you know? Clean lines, consistent look. Nothing personal." She gave a little shrug and moved on. Nothing personal. The casual cruelty of it was stunning. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate choice. I was being actively hidden, tucked away where I wouldn't interfere with the brand. A hollow ache spread through my chest, heavier than the gut feeling on the drive here. It was the painful realization that I was not just unimportant, but actively undesirable in this carefully constructed reality. I stood there for a minute, the noise of the wedding prep swirling around me, the clatter from the kitchen doors behind my designated chair, the distant sound of a string quartet practicing. I felt invisible. Worse than invisible. An obstacle. My eyes drifted across the room. They landed on the gift table. Piles of beautifully wrapped boxes, elegant envelopes. And there, standing out slightly, was my silver envelope. Hand-addressed, containing that $7,500 check that represented so much more than just a wedding gift. It represented my sacrifice, my hope, my quiet, unacknowledged support. Seeing it sitting there, after being told to hide by the kitchen door, so I wouldn't ruin photos for a random creative consultant, something in me just broke. Quietly, internally, but irrevocably. A cold calm washed over me. There was no shouting, no tears, just a steel certainty. If I wasn't welcome here, if my presence was a problem, then they didn't get my support. Not the emotional support, and certainly not the financial support. I didn't even hesitate. I walked, not stormed, but walked with a quiet, deliberate purpose, straight towards the gift table. My rented shoes made soft thuds on the polished floor. No one seemed to notice at first. I reached the table, reached down, and calmly, smoothly, picked up my silver envelope. I held it in my hand. Then, someone noticed. Maybe it was Travis, the guy who got to be best man over Caleb's actual best friend, trying to look important. "Hey, Daniel, where are you going?" he called out, a puzzled look on his face. I stopped. I turned slightly, holding the envelope up just for a second, letting them see it. My voice was low, steady, but I made sure it carried just enough for those nearby to hear. "Don't worry," I said, looking towards where I knew Caleb and Aurora were, toward my parents who were now staring. "I'll stay out of your perfect picture forever." And I turned and walked out. The large double doors swung open, letting in the afternoon sun and the crunch of the gravel parking lot. I didn't look back, but I heard it. Caleb's voice, panicked now, behind me. "Daniel, wait, what are you doing?" I kept walking until I reached my car, the gravel loud under my shoes. I got in, but I didn't drive away immediately. I just sat there for a moment, the engine off, looking back at the beautiful, picture-perfect venue through the rearview mirror. It felt surreal, like I had just exited a movie where I wasn't even cast as an extra, just some guy who wandered onto the set by accident and had to be removed. Back at the hotel, I changed out of the suit, folded it carefully. I took the silver envelope from my pocket. I pulled out the $7,500 check and the note I had written. Reading the note now, words about being proud, about supporting their new chapter, felt like reading a message from a different person, living in a different, more hopeful reality. I read it once, then slowly, deliberately, tore it cleanly in half. The check remained untouched for the moment. I turned off my phone, wanting silence. It didn't last long. When I powered it back on a couple of hours later, it was flooded. Missed calls from Caleb, from Mom, a string of increasingly anxious texts. The final one, the one that killed any shred of doubt or potential guilt, was from Aurora. All caps, blunt and self-centered. "You really ruined everything today." That was it. The shame evaporated. The hurt crystallized into cold clarity. I hadn't ruined everything. I had ruined their carefully constructed facade. Their curated, filtered fantasy couldn't handle an ounce of reality. The reality of a family member who didn't fit the aesthetic, who actually made sacrifices they couldn't be bothered to acknowledge. My quiet support for years, the massive financial risk I took, none of it mattered compared to how I looked in the background of their Instagram carousel. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel before sunrise, grabbed a stale croissant from the breakfast bar, and drove straight back to my apartment. On the drive, the missed calls and texts continued. Mom's messages had shifted from disappointed, "You shouldn't have left," to panicked, "Please call your brother, he's devastated," to subtly manipulative, "Family means sometimes making sacrifices, Daniel." Sacrifices. That word, coming for her, after everything, was almost funny. What sacrifices had they made? Caleb got his perfect, curated, Instagrammable wedding, minus one inconvenient brother. Aurora got her aesthetic. What had they given up? Nothing real. My sacrifices, the ones that mattered, had been invisible to them. Back in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the comfortable, slightly messy reality of my own life, that bank loan loomed large. The $300,000 I co-signed. The financial tightrope I'd been walking for Caleb, putting my own dreams on hold. This wasn't just about a wedding snub anymore. It was about fundamental disrespect and disregard for a massive personal risk I'd taken for them. And then the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. It was the bank. The representative was polite but firm. They'd received my notification of intent to withdraw as co-signer. Given some existing irregularities with the loan payments, a polite way of saying Caleb had likely missed or been late on recent ones, my withdrawal triggered an immediate review. They needed my absolute confirmation, and if I proceeded, it would likely require immediate action from Caleb to secure the loan, possibly within 48 hours, or face default. It was the catalyst I didn't know I needed. It wasn't just emotional. It was financial reality crashing down. I went to my computer, pulled up every email, every document, every bank statement related to that loan. Seeing it all laid out, the massive sum, the payment dates, the evidence of my emergency transfers, the lack of communication from Caleb about the business's actual health, solidified my resolve. I wasn't just hurt. I was in danger because of his irresponsibility and their combined arrogance. I wasn't trying to destroy him, but I had to protect myself. I drafted a formal email to the bank, copied to Caleb, stating my formal withdrawal as co-signer, effective immediately, citing personal and financial reasons, and revoking authorization for my credit or identity to be used further. It was cold, clean, legally sound. I attached the necessary forms. My finger hovered over send for a moment, not out of hesitation, but because I knew this was it, the point of no return. I clicked send. Then, just to be smart, I forwarded the key documents and a summary to a lawyer friend from college, just in case things got messy, which, with Caleb in Aurora, felt inevitable. Less than an hour later, Caleb called. His voice wasn't panicked yet, more tightly controlled frustration. "Did you just pull out the loan?" he demanded. "Yes," I said, my voice flat. "Why? Now. The wedding just happened. Don't be petty." "It's not petty, Caleb," I said, leaning back in my chair. "It's overdue. And the why now is because you finally showed me exactly where I stand. Or where I sit, I guess." Behind a pillar by the kitchen, there was silence on his end. Then he let out a frustrated sigh. Okay, let's talk about this. Come over. We'll figure it out." "Figure it out?" I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping me. "Like how you figured out where to seat me. Or how to tell everyone I wasn't good enough for your precious photos. Or how to let your new wife treat me like an inconvenience after I put my neck on the line for your business." More silence. I added, quieter, "You didn't even ask if I was okay when I left. You called because the bank called you. Because there's something you want from me again." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, his voice lower, a hint of something that might have been genuine concern mixed with self-pity. "So, is this like permanent? Are you just done?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "That depends on you. On whether you can even begin to understand what happened." And I hung up. I didn't feel victorious. Just incredibly, profoundly tired. Like I'd finally cleaned up a mess that wasn't mine, but had been left for me year after year. What I didn't know was how fast the ripples would spread. The very next day, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Mr. Galen, Aurora's father. His tone was polite, almost unnervingly so, but sharp as steel. He'd heard about the issue with the loan and wanted clarification on the sudden change in agreement. I calmly explained the situation from my perspective. My previous role as a co-signer, the significant personal financial risk I had undertaken, the lack of operational involvement or transparency from Caleb, my decision to withdraw due to a pattern of disregard that culminated in the wedding events, and the fact that I was under no legal or moral obligation to continue supporting a venture from which I was personally excluded and put at risk. Mr. Galen listened, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "I understand. I just wish you'd spoken to me first." "I wish a lot of things were done differently, Mr. Galen," I replied. He ended the call shortly after. The implication clear. My action was causing major problems for his investment and his daughter's new husband. The calls and texts from Caleb and Mom continued, becoming more desperate. Caleb swung wildly between fury, pathetic apologies, and trying to convince me everyone was being dramatic. Mom started laying on the guilt thick, painting me as the villain tearing the family apart. I mostly ignored them, letting them deal with the chaos they created. Around this time, I got a message on social media from my cousin Melissa. We weren't super close, but friendly. Her message was short. "Hey, quick random question. Were you also asked not to be in the family photos at Caleb's wedding?" That word, "also," stopped me cold. We talked that night. Melissa had been seated at a table so far back, near the portable heaters, her husband didn't even get a place card. Apparently, Aurora had sent the wedding coordinator a completely revised guest list and seating chart just 2 days before the event, purely for aesthetic optimization. Melissa had talked to other cousins who felt similarly sidelined. One who drove 6 hours and couldn't even get a proper drink. Another who brought an expensive gift from the registry only to find their table hidden behind a hedge. It turned out a significant portion of our side of the family had been shunted to the fringes to make room for Aurora's friends, her casual acquaintances, anyone who fit the vibe or looked Instagrammable. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a stage production, and we were the unpolished extras they didn't want in the shot. Validation poured in. Jason, Caleb's actual best friend since childhood, reached out to me separately. He confirmed Caleb had replaced him as best man at the last minute with Travis, a business contact, because Travis had a bigger social media following and looked better in photos. Jason was just as hurt and disgusted as I was, adding another layer to Caleb's betrayal. A week or so later, Melissa organized a brunch for the exiles. About a dozen cousins and other relatives showed up. It was casual, no pretense. We swapped stories, laughed at the sheer absurdity of the wedding, and validated each other's feelings of hurt and disrespect. We were the inconvenient truth of the family, gathering quietly away from the spotlight. It was cathartic. Near the end of the brunch, Melissa looked at me, serious for a moment. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft, "thank you for walking out." My head snapped up. "We were all sitting there," she continued, gesturing to the group, feeling invisible, feeling disrespected, thinking, how could they do this? "We were all thinking about leaving. You actually did it. You had the guts." That stuck with me. You had the guts. It would have been easier to just sit in that lonely chair, swallow the humiliation, smile falsely for the photos I wouldn't be in, and pretend everything was fine. It would have been easier to keep silently managing Caleb's financial messes. But instead, I stood up. Not for revenge, not for drama, but because I finally understood my own worth and refused to let them diminish it, refused to be cropped out of my own life. Weeks later, a handwritten letter arrived from Caleb. I still have it. It's tucked away with the torn pieces of that note I wrote for the $7,500 check. The letter was typical Caleb. A mix of regret about the outcome, frustration at the disruption to his business, vague attempts at reconciliation framed around him needing my help. He never actually wrote the words, "I'm sorry," but he did write something that felt like a partial acknowledgement, buried amongst the excuses. I thought keeping the peace meant avoiding conflict, but I see now it really meant ignoring you. I haven't responded. Maybe I will someday, when and if he truly understands. Maybe I won't. But I know this. I am no longer the quiet brother in the background. I'm not a placeholder, a fallback, or a chair by the wall. I am Daniel. I chose myself, and this time I stayed firmly in my own frame.